evening, everybody. My name is Mario Reyes. I am excited today to host One Book, One Read conversation on community action. I am engaged here with an amazing panel. Just a little bit about myself to start everybody off. I am a Atlanta transplant, origin of the Bronx, New York, 6-year Air Force veteran. And then I decided to come and make Atlanta my home after a brief 13-year stop in the DC area. I'm here with Rohit Malhotra, founder and executive director of Center for Civic Innovation, as well as Mr. Gene Kansas, cultural developer and founder of Gene Kansas Commercial Real Estate, and founder and president of Constellations. And lastly, I have Mr. Anthony Knight, founder of the Baton Foundation, that serves the emotional, cultural, and intellectual needs of Black boys in Atlanta and in the African diaspora. I think that this panel is extremely diverse in their mission statements, as well as just train of thought in which we all try to service our community. So I'm really, really interested in getting into the meat and potatoes of our conversations to see how you guys serve our actual community. So I want to start with Rohit. Can you say a little bit more about your foundation and yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you you having me on. I have my co-host, my dog, who may show up at a certain point, but I'm super excited. My name is Rohit Malhotra. I am the founder and executive director of the Center for Civic Innovation in Atlanta. Our organization is focused on solving inequality in what is America's most unequal city, the city that prides itself on being the beacon of the civil rights movement and being at the center of almost every social movement in our country's history. Also today stands as the most unequal city. Atlanta, Georgia is home for me. It's where I grew up. It's a city that I care deeply about, but it's also one where our organization kind of pushes for three things. One, for us to have a more honest conversation about what's actually happening in our city, what's working, what's not working, and why is it not working, and what we can do about it. The second thing that we do is we invest in community leaders, people who are actually on the ground inside of communities who are most proximate to these challenges. We believe that they already have the genius and the solutions to already solve the challenges in their own communities. And so we have a program that invests in their work. And then the third is that we advocate for policy change. We think that social change can't just happen person to person. If we want systems level change so that the change lives beyond our lifetimes, we have to actually see that reflected in our public policy. So we do a lot of work around reimagining local public policy. But yeah, we're just a big community of good troublemakers in Atlanta, just trying to make our city the best version of itself today.
Awesome. That's a really great segue when we talk about good troublemakers. Now I'm going to introduce somebody who brought the John Lewis mural right to the historic Auburn district. Mr. Gene Kansas, how you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks everyone for having me, for Auburn Avenue Research Library for hosting this incredible panel. I'm in great company. Our company does what we call cultural development. That's really the cultural and physical development of the city. So Mario, you mentioned the John Lewis Hero mural. I definitely have to give a shout out to the Loss Prevention who painted it. And our company was in a fortunate position in that case to work with Congressman Lewis's office, looking for a place to make a statement about the congressman being in the district and in the neighborhood, and really showing the importance of arts. And so while we do physical development in the built environment, historic preservation, adaptive reuse, and that type of thing, really that the buildings don't mean a whole lot without the people. And the things that we do together as people are known as culture. And when we do them, they become history. And so that's our focus. The fundamental principle of the company is to demonstrate what's possible. Everyone who's on this call does the same thing. Basically illuminate paths and pathways so that others can see them and hopefully see that we're all being successful, and hopefully more people can be engaged in cultural development and the preservation of history and culture in Atlanta.
There you go. And again, another great segue. You talk about illuminating the way. W.E.B. Du Bois has the charge of the talented 10th. That means if you are of that fortunate group that are the educated, it is your job to reach back and pull people up to follow after you. So it's no longer the 10th, it becomes the 20th, 30th, until we're all just peers in that sense. And that's a wonderful segue for Mr. Anthony Knight and what he does for and with Black boys in Atlanta. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Mario. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel, and thank you to the Auburn Avenue Research Library for hosting this talk. The Baton Foundation is an organization I founded in 2015, partly in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's killer in 2013. It happened to be that year, 2013, the centennial of my paternal grandparents' birth. And I remember standing in front of my television, watching this man be acquitted of killing a young Black boy 100 years after my grandparents were born, and observed similar things in the very same town. My paternal grandparents are from Sanford, Florida. My father was born in Sanford, Florida. And they left Sanford, Florida when my dad was about 5. So it was just one of those moments that a person has when you look around and say to yourself, you know, what is going on, and why 100 years after the birth of my grandparents are these kinds of things still happening. I also remember hearing around that time a lot of other Black folks saying similar things as I was, you know, what's going on? This is 2013. And I had to stop myself. I really did, because I'm a student of history. I've spent most of my adult life working in museums, specifically history museums. And so there's a lot about the history of this country that I know, the history of Black people, history that I know. And I really had to stop myself because I realized that while some things seem to have changed, what I consider to be the country's foundational principles have really not changed a whole lot. And so instead of figuring out, you know, or keep continuing to ask the question, why, I really kind of got myself into gear to figure out what I could do. How could I help Black boys particularly, but Black people in general? How could I help them not ask the question why, but help to understand, or help our children understand, the terrain in which they exist? And so that was the impetus really for creating the Baton Foundation, to help Black children understand the environment in which they exist, so that they can know how to better live their lives and better take charge of their own destinies without feeling a sense of hopelessness, really. Because Black people, in spite of all of the horrific things that have happened to us in this country and in many cases around the world, we, like other human beings, continue to thrive. And so it was important for me to create a platform in which that could happen. But in addition to Black children, I was equally interested in helping Black people in general. And then the larger society, of course, the larger Atlanta community, better understand certain aspects of Black history and culture about which they may not have been aware. And so that prompted me to create these public lectures, public fora, and the Auburn Avenue Research Library has been a partner with us in that from the very beginning. And so we have authors and lecturers, performers, pre-COVID, of course. We continue to do some things virtually, but there are some things we just can't do virtually. Film screenings, for example, and performances. But it was important for me to present various aspects of Black scholarship, Black history and culture to the public so that they could start to learn and maybe take some ownership and help other people learn the things that they would be learning through the Baton Foundation. So that's, in a nutshell, what we've been doing for the last 6 years now. Since 2016 is when we started all of our programming.
That's awesome. I'm listening to the testimonies from the three of you, and the first thing that comes to mind is be a thermostat, not a thermometer. Anybody could tell you what the temperature is. Everybody could become the product of their environment, but it takes people that have the drive to see the issues at hand and care enough to change it. And I'm glad that you went into the impetus of your organization, Anthony. And I also like that you touched on the principles in which this country was first started on, and how you've noticed those principles not change as much. And one of the things I noticed when I was doing some research on you is that you have 4 core principles in which you teach the young boys, correct?
That is correct. We focus, the Saturday morning program for Black boys is a bi-weekly program from September through April. And a component of the program is also travel. And so before COVID, we were able to do our first travel experience, a one-day travel experience to the Equal Justice Institute in Montgomery, Alabama. So the boys in the program got a chance to see the Peace and Justice Memorial there. In the future, we hope to do even more extensive travel, maybe going to places like Washington, D.C., even overseas travel at some point, because as I learned in graduate school, learning in class is great, but going places and seeing things and experiencing things outside of the city in which you live is equally important. And so I want to start.
I'm a proponent of that, definitely.
I want to start helping the boys understand, we can sit in class and talk about various issues, but I want you to move around the country, move around the world to see other Black people, because I think sometimes in this country, Black folk, think that, oh, well, this is us here and, we're the only Black folk on the planet. Well, that's really just not true, of course. But in terms of the four areas that we focus on self-awareness, because it's critical for me that all human beings, but of course Black boys particularly, have a sense of who they are outside of being a Black boy. Because first and foremost, we are spiritual beings. And I don't mean that in any religious sense, but we are spiritual beings. We are human beings with something that we can't see moving us forward every day, something navigating us, something that speaks through us. And so who are you as this being, as this living entity called a Black boy? And so we do some seminars related to that. And then we go into seminars based on history. We also focus some of our seminars on cultural elements of Black culture. And then the last segment that we finish up the academic year with is what we call self-mastery. How as a person, how as a Black boy, do you navigate some challenging situations that may befall you? And it's not always about the police and racism and all of those kinds of things, but just kind of simple things. How do you navigate the challenge of having a friend who may be trying to involve you in doing things that may not be right, may be immoral or possibly even illegal? How do you navigate as a young, impressionable person? How do you navigate some of those kinds of things? So hopefully we're helping the boys think about all of those things, the history and culture, of course, but the self-awareness and the self-mastery. So those are the 4 components of the academic year that we focus on with the boys.
That's an amazingly strong foundational principle for any human being. I truly appreciate the discussion of diversity in that. As an Afro-Puerto Rican myself, I was fortunate enough to get very familiar with my African roots growing up, based on my godparents. And as you said, one of the best things that ever happened was going to the military and getting that culture shock and seeing people from all walks of life. I want to move on to Jean. Jean, I'm curious as to what was the impetus of your various foundations, and which do you feel has the most socially responsible impact locally?
Well, it's a great question. It's like, what was your favorite place to visit in Europe question? No, it's a great question. I think for the sake of this call, I'll focus on Constellations, which is a civic and socially based shared workspace that we have in Sweet Auburn, neighbors with the Auburn Avenue Research Library. And that company did not start with a business plan. It started with an idea of, could there be a better workshop? Workshops that I had participated in as a professional up to that date, especially around real estate, were frankly primarily older white men in real estate. And I did not think that that was representative of the city in which we live and the buildings that we study in or live in, or, you know, go on a first date to, or, you know, live. And so I had this idea to have a workshop that was truly diverse. So it was not diverse, however, in like-mindedness, meaning people who were engaged, who were thoughtful and good at thinking. And so we got together at this bookstore, independent bookstore, and we talked for 3 hours, questions about what is culturally inspiring workspace, and basically came out of that with some ideas and some guiding principles that are really design principles. They can be applied holistically to anything. It could be a conversation. It could be the architecture of space. It could be messaging. It could be programming, educational or mentoring, in some of the cases, you know, with you all on the call. And they are freedom of choice, variety of experience and opportunity, and community with retreat. We all need to be around other people, and sometimes it's good to, you know, be alone, frankly, and think and be reflective. And like 6 months later, I walked into this building on Auburn Avenue. It was for sale. It had been home to the Southern Education Foundation for the previous 30 years. They were looking to make a move to Centennial Park. I walked in and fell in love with the building and the energy. Unbeknownst to me at that time, in 1963, Congressman Lewis had his office there when he was chair of SNCC. The positive energy, the culture, the history that is there, the architecture, it was beautiful. And so we set out to create a space that was around like-mindedness. And I knew from being in that workshop that that would ultimately lead to diversity, because I think it's, especially being a white developer in Sweet Auburn, I think it would be disingenuous at best to try to make something diverse. So we just focused on a program around professional folks who want to try to make a positive difference in the world. And I think, like Anthony was talking about with the platform, I know about Rohit, I know about you. It turns out platform models are really, I think, a smart way to go, and you can see the world shifting in that way. And so the platform that we have is basically supporting the great, wonderful, hard work that others do. And that's how we make a positive difference in the world. And so I think that doing it in Sweet Auburn, one, it's personally fulfilling and enjoyable because of the rich history there, and because it's fun, and because of the energy of students, and because it's visible, and because of the history. But you know, I'm hoping that others see that and want to come and spend time in Sweet Auburn, primarily for the preservation of the history and culture. Because since 1976, when the neighborhood was designated a historic landmark district, we've lost 47% of the buildings that have made it, in my opinion, the most historically significant neighborhood in the world. It's Black history and it's civil rights history, and that, you know, is really important to be mindful about.
Definitely. I love what you said about when you started, it wasn't necessarily to scale. It was birthed out of passion. It was birthed not out of need, not out of any other driving factors. I think when you create a mastermind, there's something profound to be said about being challenged by like-minded people who aren't looking to change your mind. They're just looking to express theirs. And when you walk through those doors and you know you're at home, there's something also to be said about the soul of a building.
Yes.
We talked earlier about Spring and Third, the yin yang in downtown Atlanta, and how when you walked in there, before you even got on that stage, you felt the remnants of all the reverberations of those amazing artists that came before you, and it helped galvanize you, much like the Apollo in New York. And I'm really grateful that you decided to help preserve that Auburn culture, especially when this city is wrestling with gentrification on a scale that is, I wouldn't even, it's commensurate with an actual invasion.
And it's scary because gentrification obviously is bad. I've seen, and I'm curious if any of y'all are finding the same thing out there, coming out of this pandemic and being able to kind of walk around again, so to speak, the amount of globalization and the detrimental side effect of that is terrifying. I mean, everything is becoming like Wally World. And I think it makes it even more important what each of you do and what Auburn Avenue Research Library does. Because if you can't focus, celebrate, introduce, support, the individual and the individual businesses, it's going to be, lost.
Yeah, I agree. And actually speaks directly to one of the things that Rohit said earlier, in that you could find all of the talent you need locally right here. So instead of trying to always import, how about we invest into our backyards? The grass is greenest where you water it, right? So in that, let's nurture the existing community and replace the economy of those streets, one block at a time. Now, Rohit, how you doing? I want to talk to you about your foundation, your principles. What made you start your organization?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with the fact that Atlanta's home for me. And when you're fighting for your home, that usually comes from a place of unapologetic love, which means that logic is not always on your side for why you do something, but you do it because that's where you were raised, that's where your family is, that's where you hope to raise your own family. And that's what Atlanta is for me. It's home. And I think when you love something, there's also there is a necessity for us to be honest about where it has it wrong, and where it can be better. Inequality is by design. This is not some spiritual thing that fell on us. It is human made. Inequality is something that we have designed and that we have perpetuated, and then allowed for the conversation to be like, I can't believe this happened. Well, I think that where our necessity for these types of conversations needs to go is, it's going to take us just as much time as it took to create this inequality and create and design this inequality. It's going to take us at least that much time to unravel it. And the way you unravel inequality is by hitting it on the nose. It means addressing it where our public policies are wrong. You have to shift them. Where dollars need to be moved, we have to move them. Where behavior needs to be changed, we have to change it. And, our inspiration of work is that this is solvable if we're actually willing to solve it. If what we're looking to do is to build organizations and businesses to solve market-driven, like if we want a market-based solution to a market-created problem, we're in big trouble because none of us should have jobs doing this. This social change work is not meant to be a career path. For those of us who do it, who are on the ground, like, this is not fun. This is necessity work. And so we don't want to have this job. And so I think we have to figure out, how do we incentivize solving these challenges so that all of us go out of business? Because if our organization remains in business for another generation, that's yet another generation that is hit by inequality. To kind of what Gene was talking about, like, yeah, I mean, Atlanta is changing. It is moving. And it is because it was never designed for the people who already live here. It never was. It's infrastructure, it's public transportation systems, it's walkability, it's grocery stores. It's designed for someone else. And so we use the narrative of Atlanta to sell Atlanta to someone else who displaces Atlanta. And so I think that gentrification is only bad when not everyone can participate in its effects. I think people have a big misconception about how poor folks feel sometimes. Like, I grew up super poor. That doesn't mean I didn't like nice things. I still like Jordans. I still wanted to like have a nice grocery store. I wanted to feel respected. Like, at the end of the day, folks who may not have the highest income are not walking around being like, I'm so poor, like, look at me.
We like fruit.
Like, yeah, well. That's right. We're just like, we're perpetuating a bad narrative about folks. And I don't think gentrification has to be a bad thing, but it's bad when it benefits only a very small group of folks. And I think that that's where we're at in Atlanta. It's an unrecognizable city today.
I think you touched on something that really hit home for me, in which when you said, this isn't work, this is necessity work. This is not something that we want to do. We're doing it out of necessity. And for being a brother on with your boots to the ground, I'm just curious how you stay mentally healthy and inspired when these are the challenges you face day in and day out. Because like many of us that do have boots on the ground know, you are going to run into some very sad stories in your conversation with the youth, in conversations with a single mother of 5, in conversations with drug-laden neighborhoods, in conversations with people with diabetes. It's a lot. So yeah. How do you stay inspired and mentally healthy? And what do you do for yourself in that regard?
Yeah, look, Black and brown folks have been doing this. It's in my DNA to be resilient on these narratives. This is, my parents immigrated to this country with every possible challenge put in front of them. They were designed to fail. The American dream is a facade for immigrants, but it's a luring tactic that builds up your resilience to understand that this is work we got to do.
Great marketing.
Yeah. I mean, look, in terms of my own care and well-being, when I'm in community, I use genius language, not deficit language. I don't talk to folks as if I need to be that 10%, that I'm that 10% that needs to bring them in. I talk to them because they're the majority. They're the 90%. I'm the exception, right? I'm the one who needs to understand what their reality is. I'm the one who needs to see the genius that already exists in that community. It's just a switch when you talk to people, how much joy actually can come in community organizing. One of my last conversations with Congressman Lewis, I asked him a similar question that you're asking us. I said, how did you remain upright? And he said, music. And he said, we danced and we played and we had joy in our pain. And so the truth is, I throw on my music. I got my Kendrick Lamar going when I need it. I got my Outkast blasting when I need it. And I have a strong support system and network of people. But I also think that I know that my time in this work is now, but that this work is bigger than me. And what that means is that when my feelings or my self-care becomes more important than the work, then it's also my time to pass the baton and step away, because hurt people. And so it's very important that this sector is not viewed as any one individual's journey, but that we are a part of a larger collective that has a larger responsibility. But friends, family, music, good food, never heard nobody.
And your Beyonce socks, right?
That's right. My Beyonce socks always.
I really appreciate what you said there, because I'm sure Anthony can attest to this as well as Gene, in that when you mentor, a lot of times somebody assumes that you're doing it to enlighten somebody else. And it's almost like parenthood. You get out much more than you could ever anticipate. You know, the joy a child brings into your life, the joy of serving your community, it's work in title only, not necessarily in nature. So I want to ask both of you, Anthony, what would you say, how you stay invigorated and inspired to tackle these challenges? And how do you do it and maintain a smile on your face?
It depends on the day. Some days I almost can't. So I just have to say that, because I'd like to think that I'm resilient and strong and all of those things that Rohit talked about. I'd like to think that that was always possible, but sometimes it's not. But what keeps me inspired is working with the young people, the guys. One of the first guys who began in my program, the Cultural Heritage Program in 2016, was he was 13 that summer, but he turned 14 right before the program started in September. He had some challenges like a lot of young people have related to family matters. And so I was able to talk to him over the course of the, 4 years or so that he was with the program, and saw him change in ways that were really quite astounding. And I was fortunate enough that one of the challenges he had, I also had growing up. And so I was able to share with him how I managed that situation and how I kind of worked my way through it. And I didn't really know if he was listening. I mean, I knew he was listening, but I didn't know where it was going in him.
You know, he heard you. You wasn't sure if it was registered.
That's correct. Well, he graduated from high school and was very excited, sent me the information, and he sent me a text message. He said, thank you, in all these capital letters. And he said, you really don't know how much you've helped me. And I knew what he was talking about. That young man has now enlisted as of last May in the military. He had always wanted to be a Navy SEAL. He's in his training, and I'm not a military person, so I don't know all of the details, but to see him having his own income, he has a young lady friend that he seems pretty serious about. He's able to buy some of the things he'd always wanted to be able to buy. He's saving money as well. He has visions of purchasing a home. And so to see him now living his life and knowing that perhaps our organization, our foundation, and maybe even I played a small part in that is just immensely gratifying.
You know, one of the principles of Navy SEAL is exactly one of your principles. It's self-mastery.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing the challenge in front of you and having the confidence in yourself that you will overcome it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. He's an amazing young person. He never shared a lot and still doesn't share a lot about his internal machinations. He's not a very emotional kind of person, but it's so amazing. I will randomly get calls every couple of weeks from wherever he is in the country doing whatever training he's doing, showing me pictures of where he's at. And it almost always makes me cry because I know some of the things he went through, some of the hills and valleys he's traversed to become the person he is now. And to know that maybe I had a very small role to play in helping to save a Black boy from going down a path that might have ended him in a more questionable position is just extremely gratifying. And so on the days when I don't have a lot of strength, or when I feel like I don't know if I can get one more call from a parent asking me to help do something completely unrelated to the program, on those days when I'm feeling my most spent, something like that will happen. I'll get a call from a former student, or it's just amazing. It really is just phenomenal. It really is.
Well, sometimes the reward is always the service. Now, Gene, you have literally a bare minimum 4 organizations that you're doing. And I presume you also have a family. So I'm sure you get taxed a lot. How do you stay mentally healthy? How do you stay invigorated to face the challenges in serving your community, sir?
Well, I'm definitely going to answer that. But first, I want to just say that you're a really good host. You ask really good questions. And it is not lost on me that your question about mentoring was you mentoring us in some way. So thank you for that. You're leading us down a nice path. It's true. And it's fun. You know, Anthony said, you know, it depends on the day. I think it does. I think it also depends on the season. Becoming a dad, definitely a season. I've always been a bit of a late bloomer. So had our son when I was 40. I'm 49. So it helps. I'm not going to be, you know, the fastest dad on the playground by any stretch, but I've had some time and some experience. And one of those seasons, prior to, or actually it was right around the time that we had our son, when I was probably 42 or so, I had what I call a midlife awareness. It wasn't a crisis, but it was a question that I was asking myself, which is, what do you want to do for the rest of your life, apply to every part of your life? And I think having that vision and goal, so it's who do you want to spend time with? What do you want to work on? How do you plan to handle your health? Do you want more education? Do you want more travel? You know, what do you want to do? And having that be kind of lifelong is helpful because it doesn't, it is balanced out the like ups and downs that can occur because I'm thinking much longer term. And in terms of like the different businesses, I learned a long time ago that focus is really good. And so while I do have a variety of businesses that, you know, I work on and they're all really integrated vertically with each other. They have to work together. You know, I think that goes for everyone here too. Like the more you're working together within your own organization or with others, likely the smarter you will be working, and that usually means better.
Awesome. There's a couple of things I want to touch on with that. One, a 9-year-old, cherish every second. Every second. The time is so fleeting, and I got 2 of my own, and now I'm starting to see the beginning of what empty nest syndrome is going to look like. So, you know, that time that you have is the one commodity we can't get back. So when you're speaking about making sure that you spend your time with all your organizations to all run vertically, so that way it's really one mission statement that all and they're just servicing different dimensions of that mission statement, is absolutely brilliant. So I wanted to commend you on that.
Thank you. And I hear you too on the kid, because when you're a young dad or young into being a dad, people say that and it doesn't resonate quite as much. I think that the same thing goes with the mentoring, especially of boys. Anthony, I was fortunate to be a mentor in Big Brothers Big Sisters for 17 years, and I saw the benefit of just being there. Sometimes that's all it is, and the work that you're doing. I know, Mario, you're mentoring, including on this call and with families and conversations between dads and the kids. And Rohit, I've been a part of your mentoring, and it is hard work, you mentioned, for you, and difficult work. You do make it fun. I think that that's a key ingredient to your success, at least for the fans that you have out there, myself included. So it seems like we're on the right path, and I'm just going to keep doing it.
That goes for everything. If you're able to make it fun and have that allure still, slipping in a little bit of medicine with the candy doesn't hurt. It's almost necessary, right? And I think about where I'm headed in the future and where I want my organizations to go. So I'm curious, as for you guys, how do you see your organizations evolving with the challenges as they come about? Like, my background when I was in the military was technology. I'm still a government contractor managing cloud systems. That doesn't really sound necessarily sexy for the kids in my mentoring group, right? Like, they want to, I'm 6'5", they want to know what sport I play instead of cloud engineering, right? Cloud endearment doesn't work the same. But when I explain to them the difference between being an operator and an engineer, it starts to click a little bit more. They start to say, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, being an operator means you know how to use a device. Being an engineer means you know how to create a device. You know how to create the platforms and everything else that everybody else could use. So I'm curious as to, for your respective organizations, how do you see yourself evolving, being how we're on the precipice of Web 3.0 and all the other changes coming into the system? I'll throw that to you first, Rohit.
Yeah, I think our evolution is going to be about how a new generation of people are thinking differently about what it means to invest in social impact work, to reinvent and maybe even go back to the original definition of what philanthropy means, that this work is not about feeling good about yourself to give someone else something, but that it's our collective responsibility to have a society that has education as a right, healthcare as a right, that our people and our planet depend on it. And you're seeing that in our fight. You're seeing it in our activism. There's a new spirit in the air around it. We are literally in the middle of one of the largest labor movements in history happening right now. And history books will write about it. But
are you referring to Amazon?
No, I'm referring to how Amazon is going to have to face Gen Z in actually paying people properly, in making sure that now you're watching companies being forced. They're forcing their hands around what fair wages are supposed to look like, what benefits are supposed to look like, how we make sure that, new moms and new dads are able to actually be new moms and new dads, and that people are not measured by their productivity, but they're measured by their value as human beings inside of a workplace. There is a true social movement around labor happening that we haven't defined it yet. There's a movement around transportation happening, the right to that I think transportation will become the civil rights issue of our time. People's ability and their right to get from point A to point B. It's why every company in the world is thinking about that. Our healthcare system was on the verge of collapse, but we showed what a public benefit system could look like during COVID. And so I think that COVID didn't create inequality, it exposed how bad it was, how bad we've been failing people for so long and getting away with it. And frankly, young folks aren't going to put up with people's hashtags as being sufficient as a way for actually achieving and accomplishing social justice. We're going to hold your purse strings. We're going to be accountable. You're going to see a new wave of organizing. You've got a new civil rights movement on your hands. So my work is about cultivating that, opening doors for that, creating and keeping a bridge for that, because this isn't going to be your 1900s movement building. This is a new 2020 plus energy movement that's happening. And I think young people are going to have to save us out of what could be a huge mess that generations before created. So
I think Gene will be able to preserve the 1900 building for us to keep the movement going.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Keep the buildings there. We need that. That's gonna be important. One other thing I think that's important that you've been bringing up is just like the question that you asked around mental well-being is actually a part of this generation's movement. These were taboo issues that folks did not talk about for generations. It's not that these things didn't exist, but the ability to create spaces for these conversations to exist around wellness, around well-being. I mean, in what other decade would it be that four guys are sitting here talking about mental well-being and self-care? That's happening because of social movement building that is allowing us to have more open, honest conversations. That in and of itself is a social movement. And so I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I would. It's so funny. I know we got a limited bit of time, but I swear I want you to elaborate more on the transportation part for the next 30 minutes, but I know we can't do that. But I do, you made mention of how Gen Z is now the generation that will hold every other before them accountable. And they have the means and that they have the entirety of human intelligence at the palm of their hands. You know, you could literally take a Harvard course from your phone. They have tools and utilities, and they know how to use them more than we ever had. So I got a question for Anthony right now. How do you bridge the gap in the generations for the generation from which you come from to the Gen Zers? How do you communicate effectively? How do you let them know that you are there to scale with them, and it's not just about passing down what may be perceived as archaic information?
It's real simple. Honesty. I don't think there is a divide. That's, to me, a myth. I speak openly and honestly with the guys. I don't hide anything from them. The group that we have, we keep our group small. We don't ever want more than 15 boys at a time. We currently have 8 in the program. I set the tone from the very first day. We are a family. That's literally the words I say. This is a family, and we are going to communicate as such. And so if a boy is having a particular issue with something going on in school or at home, we carve out 15, 20 minutes, whatever it might be, depending on the Saturday, for all of the boys to share something if they want to that's gone on the week before or for the previous 2 weeks since we last met. And that starts to develop a sense of trust and bonding. And when you create that kind of environment, when they know that there will be no ridiculing of whatever it is they might bring up, when they know there will be only respect shown to how they think, whatever that thought might be, how they feel, whatever that feeling might be, when they really start to understand that, you can really do anything. And they will open up in ways that have, for me, been just absolutely astounding. And so
I'm hearing a lot of emotional intelligence in the way that you communicate with the children. And in that, it creates not just a bond, but I would say it sets the baseline for the honesty that you referenced.
Absolutely.
And your consistency as well.
I don't sugarcoat history. I think that's been a mistake, and I understand why Black families have done it over the generations, over the centuries, but it's not good, in my opinion. So if we have to talk about lynchings, we had a class a couple of weeks ago on the slave ship, the kinds of brutalities and things that happened. And there was actually one boy in the class listening to the lecture, a very mild-mannered boy. He's been with me a couple of years now. Very mild-mannered, very obedient, raised in a good home and all of that kind of stuff. He actually said, when we finished the lecture part of the class and we started going into open discussion, I asked them how they felt, because there was some heavy information being shared. And so I kind of did a temperature check, how everyone was feeling and receiving the information, processing it. And this young man, 16 years old, said, I really, really, really feel like I'm hating white people right now. And that's an honest and understandable response. And so I don't say to him, oh, well, that's not a nice thing to say, or, well, we shouldn't hate all white. I'm not going to do anything with his remark. His remark was his remark. And then we can broaden it and open it up for further discussion later. But right in that moment, it's important for him to say whatever it was he needed to say and express whatever feeling he needed to say. And I, at one point during the lecture that we were listening to, almost shedded a tear, because then I told him, I said, I'm much older than you guys. I said, and I've been working in this field most of my adult life, and I've heard most everything that has happened to Africans and African Americans within the context of slavery and racial discrimination and terror. I said, but I'm always astounded when I hear information about this. And I almost always will cry, or at least feel really in my feelings for a while. And I'm much older than you guys. And so I wanted them to understand that that's okay. And if that's something that happens to them, it may not, but if that's something that happens to them, that it's okay. And we're not going to shut it down. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're going to feel it. We're going to have that pain. We might even shed a tear. And then we're going to circle back around and broaden it, put it in some context, and figure out how we move forward from there. And young people respond to that kind of honesty. They respond to that kind of truth, and they respond to that kind of emotion. And
candor, being able to give them the platform to express themselves without judgment,
absolutely,
without parenting and censorship, is so important for children.
Absolutely.
So important. And you touched on, the pain. That pain is passed down generation to generation.
Oh, absolutely.
So what you're referencing in yourself, they feel now. And I did take a Sunday and drive to the National Peace and Justice Museum. And I've never cried that much in a public setting.
Yep.
When you walk down the area and they got the plaques that give the brief synopsis of what this person was lynched for, and you see all the names and the way they're just hanging there, it is a slap in the face to the Disney and commercialized world we live in now?
Well, and it's context for what they are seeing around them every day.
Very much so.
It is context. And so it helps them figure out, okay, if these are the kinds of things that happened in the past, and if I'm seeing the kinds of things happening around me that I'm seeing today, how do I move forward? What kinds of decisions might I make? What kinds of things might I need to do to either protect myself or better educate myself, better maybe even change what I was intending to do in my life, with my life. It helps them start to, I think about their lives in a different way and what their lives mean, and how perhaps, hopefully, better value their lives and the lives of their ancestors, their parents, the kinds of sacrifices that a lot of parents have had to make, or grandparents. It helps them put into context their real lived experience today.
And I'm sure Rohit could speak to this, the hate crime bill that's being introduced now regarding modern day lynching. I was listening to NPR earlier today, and they were, the first thing I said is like, why is it needed now of all times? And then we think about Ahmaud Arbery and what a modern day lynching looks like.
Yeah, I mean, look, our public policy is a reflection of our collective morality. So the point of changing these laws is not because it will ever do justice, because it won't. The point of changing these laws is to ensure that we have put rules in place that tell ourselves as a collective, we find this to be unacceptable moving forward. But to think of these as vehicles for justice is inaccurate. And so I think as a collective, we can't take a breath in. We have to keep pushing because our laws are antiquated. They are designed and built for straight, white, landowning men. That is what this country was designed for. Every single other identity had to be, the Constitution had to be modified to accept them into this country's existence, whether that's women earning the right to vote, or whether that's you can love who you want to love, immigrants, you name it. All of us have had to have a law that recognized the existence of our identity in this country. So yeah, policy matters because it sets a tone of who we are and what we allow and what we don't.
That's your bridge in the generation right there. Hashtag policy matters. You got it right there. So I'm actually, Gene, I'm curious, how do you not just bridge the gap in generations, but since you are headquartered in such a historically relevant location for the civil rights, how do you not just bridge the gap in generations, but how do you bridge the gap in cultures with constellations?
Yeah, I mean, I think being open, welcoming, and transparent is a good place to start with that. We talked about the buildings though, and buildings they can be, a euphemism almost for anything or an analogy. What we're talking about is, where did we come from that helps inform where we are so we can know where we're going. That's really important. It could be from, you Mario, with, your service to this country, and then going into cloud-based computing. So people know, and then you can help to explain what that did for you. They get to see you and look up to you and understand where they may be able to go. Anthony, I mean, you're talking about atrocities that are extremely worthwhile for people to know, so that all people, so that we can have a good idea on where exactly we are and have the moral compass for where we want to go. And Rohit's helping to do that through, you know, micro movements and larger plans. So, you know, what I'm trying to do is basically have the spaces and places, not just in Sweet Auburn, although that's the most significant, you know, neighborhood in the world, in my opinion, for, you know, this history and culture. But to preserve it, because there are 54,000 students who go to Georgia State, just let's say alone 37 something thousand downtown campus. In normal years, there's 700 plus thousand visitors to the King Center, and they're missing half of the neighborhood because it's been demolished. So, you know, I look across the street from where we are at Constellations in the Southern School Book Building at a deteriorating Atlanta Life building. Well, Alonzo Herndon was born a slave. Sometimes I think, if I think I'm having a hard day as an entrepreneur, I like to think about Mr. Herndon, because I wasn't born a slave. I wasn't like emancipated / kicked out of the house by my father, who was also my owner, and all kinds of other horrible things and challenges that he had to go through. And when that building is no longer standing because of demolition via neglect, there are going to be a lot of people who have not taken the time to go and research it or have these type of conversations that are going to be missing it. And that's really, I think, vitally important, because one of those is going to be a mentee in the Baton Foundation, or, you know, a kid or someone who's getting involved with social justice engagement, or just going to, you know, research a project at Auburn Avenue Research Library. They're not going to see it, and they're going to not even know where they are. How can you know where you're going if you don't even know where you are?
Hey, you guys got hashtags for days. Jesus.
And also, you know, you talked about evolution. The key to evolution is adaptation. And you know, you adapt to the specific environment you find yourself in, or you become a dinosaur. Well, we don't have enough time, like 100 million years, to wait around and see what happens with us. We have to be adapting very quickly. And I think a good way to do that is to have conversations, honest conversations like Anthony's talking about, and also cultural conversations, because when you have a cultural conversation, you participate in one or you lead one, then you can know what's going on and you can help affect those change. So understanding, let's say, the zeitgeist of what's happening, like we've seen a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, with the State of the Union address, and Russia invading the Ukraine, it seems like there is a zeitgeist around people wanting peace and security. Well, that's good stuff to know if you're trying to influence policy, because you have some wind at your back for that, let's say. And I don't know anything near what Rohit does about policy change, but I know about like cultural conversations, and I'm proud and happy to be a part of this one.
Yeah, we're glad that you also don't shy away from hosting these conversations as well, through your actions, recognizing and preserving those buildings. Speaking on these ancestors of ours, that their stories need to be heard. Their buildings deserve the preservation. And, you know, it's almost like how they do these tours in Savannah and New Orleans. They take you to all these locations that have historical significance. I don't think I've ever seen that here on the scale that it requires.
Well, thank you. I mean, you know, you're right there. The programming is key. Like I said at the beginning, it's the people. And so Apache, again, is a great example. Like, people get to go in and hear and learn and socialize. If you can have a bunch of like beautiful buildings that are preserved in Sweet Auburn, but if people are not engaging within them, participating, or, you know, hearing some jazz, or, you know, having a coffee with someone, they're irrelevant.
Yeah, it could be a show without the heartbeat. Yeah. That's what us humans provide. So I want to start looking at where we're headed. So we talked about where we came from, We talked about where we're at. Now we talk about where we're headed. And I'm curious, let's start with Anthony this time. Anthony, can you provide a lessons learned per se for other people looking to follow in your footsteps, and catch the baton? See what I did there? The baton from your foundation.
Well, I don't know if I'd want anyone to follow in my footsteps. What is the quote from, I can't think of it, but don't follow my footsteps, go where I've not walked and blaze a new path, something to that effect. So don't follow me. Follow what's, in you. That's what I did. I didn't follow anyone. In fact, when I first started the foundation, there was someone who told me that I would never get funding because I'm not doing it at scale, because I only want to have a maximum of 15 boys. Well, I said, well, for me, based on my own personal experience of education and what my parents were able to do for me and my siblings, I learned at an early age, small environments are very beneficial. And so that's something important to me.
Qualification over quantification.
And if a funder doesn't value that, then that's obviously not a funder for me. So I didn't worry about that. So I think we all have our own experiences. We all have things that are important to us. And if there's any path of mine that I think a person might follow is to look inside and see what speaks to you, see what is troubling you, see what social, I don't want to call it necessarily an ill, but what social manifestation is not good for you, or you don't think is good for the world, and then figure out what you can do, what you bring to the table, what your skills and resources are, and then move in that direction. That's the only footstep of mine that I would recommend someone follow.
That's amazingly solid advice. I would take that to my own children, so that way they know where their value should be. Thank you for that, Anthony. Rohit, lessons learned. I'm sure you have. He's like, in which capacity? So from you, I don't know, which would you say is the biggest chunk of your day every day?
I spend the majority of my time with folks who are on the ground designing solutions in their own communities, trying to help them figure out the best way to create the greatest amount of impact in the shortest amount of time. Some of the lessons out of that are that, number one, I think that we are a solution-oriented culture, and we need to better understand the challenges that we are solving against before we design solutions. I think that we have a number of solutions in this country, and everyone thinks they have the solve, but they haven't actually taken the time to understand the actual challenge, what people are going through on a day-to-day basis. And they kind of turn people into data points, but people are not. They're wrapped up in so many different cultures and experiences. So that's the first thing, is just really having a strong understanding of what people's experiences are before you actually design a solution. I think that also this work takes time. Best piece of advice I ever received was that it takes 10 years to get 10 years of experience. Like it's going to take time for us to build the resolve and the skill to unravel the work that we're doing. The other thing that I think is really important is that we don't use deficit language. We actually embrace the genius of the people that we are talking about. I think we have to be really careful in how we do social movement building and whose behavior we're trying to change. This is a game of power, and social change is about not just someone gaining power, but also someone giving it up. I think about the recent movement building work that has happened around, stop Asian hate, and that those bubble up only when, you have mass murders of Asian Americans in this country. But I don't know that hashtag stop Asian hate is the rallying cry. I think we have to talk about who is it that is hating Asian people. And similarly, we need to stop just talking about asking or hoping that Black and brown people will understand and change and learn, because it's not us like that are destroying, destroying generations of challenges that we have had as a people. I think white folks have to have this conversation, and I think they gotta sit in it. It's got to be super uncomfortable. But I don't know that this is about Black people and white people, or brown people and white people, or brown and Black people to having a conversation. I think this is about white people having a conversation on who they want to be as a people, just as much as it is about our survival. And the conversations around race are nuanced. This is not I think that the challenge in this is that so many people take it as like a one-to-one conversation. Like, wait, me? I'm so diverse. Like, I have so many people around me. How could this possibly be about me? And it just goes back to the systematic design of like, why is it that, if we are talking about wealth building in this country, we have to recognize that most Black and brown people have not built wealth for more than a generation's worth of time. So it's impossible to expect the same economic mobility for people who have been left out of an economy, and in fact have been treated as an asset in that economy for so long. The last thing that I wanted to say is that this work requires grace, and it requires us to build understanding with one another on where pain is coming from, but also that we're all on different journeys of getting to the actual solution, to the society that we actually want to create. And that requires time. It requires like real deep dialogue, kind of like what you're constructing here. Like it requires us to go there. And that's what's going to lead to us building this like beautiful new way. I don't want my comments to be misconstrued as me not being hopeful. I'm extremely hopeful because I think we're finally being honest about how broken we are. And I think our Renaissance moment is one of the most therapeutic movements that I think is going to happen. The generation before us, we saw how institutions failed them. And millennials like me have become completely despising of institutions because we saw how it hurt our parents and how it hurt our families. But the next generation has seen how that pain and that anger has affected our mental well-being and who we are as a people. And I think that's why we are now not trying to repair institutions, but we're in a movement that's really going to be about repairing people. And that's spiritual, long, community-based work. But I think we got it in us to figure it out.
That you touched on a lot there. Part of it is really echoing what Anthony was talking about, in the emotional intelligence to recognize that words have value. That brutal truth sometimes needs to be had, those hard, awkward conversations. One of my favorite quotes as it pertains to race is from Dr. Viktor Frankl. He authored Man's Search for Meaning, and he said, there are only two types of races in this world: the race of the indecent and decent man. That's not to erase anybody's culture, but I think this panel is a very good indication that you could grab a man from every dimension in every corner of this world, sit them down, and hear a lot of the same values being echoed. That's because we decided to be of that decent race. Just I want to hear the lessons learned from Gene before I share this last thought that I had, just because I want to make sure it makes sense and I don't want to speak for anybody. But Gene, when you would give a protege of yours, somebody that may be watching this that is looking to start making those not just changes in society, but to attack it from a perspective in which all dimensions of themselves, of their organization, can service the community. What advice would you give, sir? Or what lessons would you say you've learned?
Well, one of them is a military one, so you may have heard it. That's the middle one, which I'll get to in a second. It's vitally important to have a plan. Plans help us get to where we want to go. You know, it's a roadmap. It's really important. The next one, which is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That's the military one.
No friction.
You know, if you're rushing down a hill or in a battle and you slip and fall, it's going to be a problem. Take your time. You'll go faster overall, meaning to accomplish your goal. And then I think the final one, and I could, by the way, because I've been in business for, I don't know, 25 years, I could probably give like 30 because I've been beat up a lot. It's a good way to learn. Like Rohit said, I love that. 10 years of experience takes 10 years. I think the last one, though, is if something's not working, try something different. That's it.
That was amazingly simple and profound at the same time. You know, the definition of what insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. One of the things that I've heard all of three of you touch on is recognizing the value of scaling, or sometimes everything doesn't require scalability. You don't need to become the Boys and Girls Club and service 5,000 children every summer, Anthony. Keeping it right at that sweet spot allows a level of intimacy and a profound impact that hosting a seminar can never. I.e., you know, performing at Apache Cafe versus Essence Festival are very different experiences. You know, and you always want the people that participate in your community building to feel important and break the cycle of inconsistency that has put them on the defense for so long. And in that, I want to say thank you all for being consistent in your missions, in your service to our community. And I just want to give all you guys a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mario.
Also like to thank the historic Auburn Research Library for allowing me, Mario Reyes, to host One Book, One Read conversation on community action. The historic Auburn Research Library means so much to me. When I first got to Atlanta 7 years ago and I walked in those doors, they welcomed me with open arms and volumes of knowledge. And it's something that I will keep in my family indefinitely. I want to thank you all again. Anybody got any last words?
I'd like to say thank you as well. And also at constellations.community, we do have a happenings membership that's free to join, and all of our events are free and open to the public.
Oh, I'm subscribing to that tonight. And let everybody know where they can find you as well, Rohit.
Yeah, no doubt. I appreciate it and grateful for the time. Grateful to be in community with Gene and with Anthony and with you. So you can find us at civicatlanta.org. We are doing a big Good Trouble Honors event in honor of the late Congressman John Lewis, to recognize local activists and community members this month. And we got a number of different conversations that we host on every given month. If you also want to learn more about how your local government works and how you can engage with it, you can go to voteatl.org. We've compiled a series of different resources about what each office does, why it's important, and how you can engage with it. So this is it's gonna take a multiple fingers to make a fist. So I'm looking forward to building community after this, and grateful for the time and for your facilitation.
Is this event for Good Trouble family friendly?
Yes, yeah, it's family friendly. Absolutely. Yep.
I'm in the building. I'm there.
Love it.
All right, Anthony, where can everybody find you at, sir?
We can be found at the batonfoundation.org. We have information about the organization, of course, about the program for Black boys, the Cultural Heritage Program. We also have on the website information about upcoming events. And we added in December, which lots of folks were asking for, recordings of past events. So now we record all of our virtual events. And so folks can go to the website and see the ones that are there. I would recommend one in particular about the slave ship called The Terror Ship by Dr. Marcus Rediker. Unbelievable lecture. With information that I just don't think lots of people know about. So they're all great, but that one in particular is really a must view a lecture.
Awesome. And let me ask you a quick question. How many pair of shell-toe Adidas do you have?
How many pair of what?
Shell-toe Adidas do you have?
0.
Why are you from Queens? How can you not have shell-toes? What are you talking about?
I got teased a lot. When I started meeting other New Yorkers as an adult, I got teased a lot because I didn't know that for a lot of New Yorkers, Queens is not really the city. Queens is like Long Island, which it's a part of Long Island, but so is Brooklyn. So we won't tell them that. But
they're just jealous because you guys actually have real houses.
That's what it is.
All right, guys, I appreciate you one more time.
Thanks a lot, Mario. Auburn Avenue. It was really good. Thanks a lot.